Chapter 3. Judaizing in the shadow of Rome. If Alexander's conquests created an open Hellenistic sphere, Rome's expansion and her enormous empire completed the process. Henceforth, all the cultural centers around the Mediterranean basin would undergo the dynamism of blending, and the forging of new phenomena. The littorals grew closer, and the passage from the eastern to the western end became easier and faster. This emerging world opened a fresh perspective for the spread of Judaism. At its high point there, Judaism was professed by 7 to 8% of all the empire's inhabitants. The word Jew ceased to denote the people of Judea, and now included the masses of proselytes and their descendants. At the height of Judaism's expansion, in the early 3rd century CE, Cassius Dio described this significant historical development, asserting, "I do not know how this title, Jews, came to be given to them, but it applies also to all the rest of mankind, although of alien race, who affect their customs." His near contemporary, the Christian theologian Origen, wrote, "The noun Ioudios is not the name of an ethnos, but of a choice, in the mema of life. For if there be someone not from the nation of the Jews, a Gentile, who accepts the ways of the Jews and becomes a proselyte, this person would properly be called a Ioudios." To understand how these two scholars arrived at the same definitions, we need to follow the discourse from its beginnings in Rome. The first mention of Judaism in Roman documents has to do with conversion, and some of the references in Roman writings to Jews who were not inhabitants of Judea address this key issue. If hostility to Jews occasionally broke out, it was due mainly to their religious preaching. The Romans were, by and large, typical polytheists, tolerant toward other beliefs, and Judaism was legal, religio licita. But the Romans did not understand the exclusivity of monotheism, and even less so the urge to convert other people and cause them to abandon their inherited beliefs and customs. For a long time, conversion to Judaism was not illegal, but it was plain to see that the converts rejected the gods of the empire, and this was perceived as a threat to the existing political order. According to Valerius Maximus, a contemporary of Augustus, as early as 139 BC Jews and astrologers were deported to their places of origin, because they tried to infect the Roman customs with the cult of Jupiter Sabazius. This was the time when the Hasmonean dynasty was consolidating its rule in Jerusalem, and in 142 BC Simon, a son of Mattathias, sent a diplomatic mission to Rome, seeking to form an alliance. Jewish monotheism was starting its expansion and was acquiring confidence and a sense of superiority over paganism. It is not known where these Jewish preachers came from, and there are different opinions about the term Jupiter Sabazius. Perhaps it was a syncretic Jewish pagan cult, but more probably Jupiter meant God and Sabazius was a corruption of Sabaoth or Sabbath. The great Roman scholar Varro identified Jupiter with the Jewish god and concluded, with incisive Latin logic, it makes no difference by which name he is called, so long as the same thing is understood. This was not the only expulsion from Rome because of proselytization. In the year 19 CE, during the reign of Emperor Tiberius, Jews as well as the followers of certain other gods were exiled from the capital, this time in large numbers. Tacitus noted in his annals that 4,000 of the freedman class who were infected with those superstitions and were of military age, should be transported to the island of Sardinia. The rest were to quit Italy, unless before a certain day they repudiated their impious rites. Similar descriptions are given by other historians. Suetonius noted that those of the Jews who were of military age he assigned to provinces of less healthy climate, ostensibly to serve in the army, the others of that same race or of similar beliefs he banished from the city. Cassius Dio reported later, as the Jews flocked to Rome in great numbers and were converting many of the natives to their ways, he, Tiberius, banished most of them. 88 Josephus, in Antiquities of the Jews, enlivened the story with an anecdote about 4 Jews who persuaded a converted noblewoman, one Fulvia, to send gold to the temple, but pocketed it themselves. Tiberius heard about it, and decided to punish all Jewish believers in Rome. The third expulsion took place in the reign of Claudius in 49 to 50 CE. According to Suetonius, though this emperor was known to favor the Jews, he expelled them, as they constantly made disturbances at the instigation of Chrestus. At this stage, we must remember, there was not yet a clear distinction between Judaism and Christianity, and in all probability this was a still undifferentiated Judeo-Christian expansion. In addition, there were also Jewish Christian and Jewish pagan groups, and Roman law did not distinguish between them, until the year 64 CE. About this particular event, Cassius Dio wrote that Claudius did not expel the Jews, who had again increased so greatly that by reason of their multitude it would have been hard without raising a tumult to bar them from the city. He did not drive them out, but ordered them to follow that mode of life prescribed by their ancestral customs and not to assemble in numbers. We have seen that Cicero had already noted the large presence of Jewish believers in Rome in the 1st century BCE, and it is known that many followers of Yahweh took part in the funeral of Julius Caesar. So it is well to remember that this substantial presence existed for a long time before the War of 70 CE, and had nothing to do with any imaginary mass expulsions from Judea after the fall of the kingdom, and the Bar Kokhba revolt. Most Roman sources indicate that this presence was due to the spread of the Jewish religion. As the rate of conversion to Judaism intensified, so did the government's disquiet and the resentment on the part of many Latin intellectuals. The great Roman poet Horace made a humorous reference to the Jewish missionary drive in one of his poems. Like the Jews, we, the poets, will force you to come over to our numerous party. The philosopher Seneca thought the Jews were a damned people, because the customs of this accursed race have gained such influence that they are now received throughout all the world. The vanquished have given laws to their victors. The historian Tacitus, no lover of Jews, was even more acerbic about the converts to Judaism. The most degraded out of other races, scorning their national beliefs, brought to them their contributions and presents. This augmented the wealth of the Jews. Circumcision was adopted by them as a mark of difference from other men. Those who come over to their religion adopt the practice, and have this lesson first instilled into them, to despise all gods, to disown their country, and set at naught parents, children, and brethren. Juvenal, the author of the satires, written in the early 2nd century CE, was especially sarcastic. He did not hide his disgust at the wave of Judaization sweeping over many good Romans, and ridiculed the process of conversion that had become popular in his time. Some who have had a father who reveres the Sabbath, worship nothing but the clouds, and the divinity of the heavens, and see no difference between eating swine's flesh, from which their father abstained, and that of man, and in time they take to circumcision. Having been wont to flout the laws of Rome, they learn and practice and revere the Jewish law, and all that Moses committed to. His secret tome, forbidding to point out the way to any not worshipping the same rites, and conducting none but the circumcised to the desired fountain. For all which the Father was to blame, who gave up every 7th day to idleness, keeping it apart from all the concerns of life. At the end of the 2nd century, Celsus, a philosopher known for his dislike of the Christians, was much less hostile to the Jews. But as the conversions grew apace, and the old religions were abandoned, he became openly antagonistic toward the proselytized masses, stating, if, then, in these respects the Jews were carefully to preserve their own law, they are not to be blamed for so doing, but those persons rather who have forsaken their own usages, and adopted those of the Jews. This mass phenomenon annoyed the authorities in Rome and upset a good many of the capital's prominent literati. It upset them because Judaism became seductive to broad circles. All the conceptual and intellectual elements that would make for the future appeal of Christianity and its eventual triumph were present in this transient success of Judaism. Traditional, conservative Romans felt the danger and voiced their concern in various ways. The crisis of the hedonistic culture, the absence of an integrating belief in collective values, and the corruption infecting the administration of the imperial government appeared to call for tighter normative systems and a firmer ritual framework, and the Jewish religion met those needs. The Sabbath rest, the concept of reward and punishment, the belief in an afterlife, and above all the transcendent hope of resurrection were enticing features that persuaded many people to adopt the Jewish faith. Furthermore, Judaism also offered a rare communal feeling that the spreading imperial world, with its corrosive effects on old identities and traditions, seemed to lack. It was not easy to follow the new set of commandments, but joining the chosen people, the holy nation, also conferred a precious sense of distinction, a fair compensation for the effort. The most intriguing element of this process was its gender aspect. It was the women who led the large-scale movement of Judaization. Josephus's story about Damascus noted that Judaism was especially popular among the city's women, and as we have seen, Queen Helena of Odiabene had a decisive role in the conversion of the royal family. In the New Testament, we are told, Saul of Tarsus, known as Paul, had a disciple who was the son of a certain woman which was a Jewess and believed, but his father was a Greek, Acts 16:1. In Rome, too, the women were drawn more readily to Judaism. The poet Martial, who came from Iberia, made fun of the women who observed the Sabbath. Epigraphic material from the Jewish catacombs names as many female converts as male. Especially notable is the inscription about Veturia Paula, who was renamed Sarah after her conversion and became the mother of 2 synagogues. Fulvia, wife of Sotoninus, on whose account, according to Josephus, Jews were expelled in the year 19 CE, was a full convert. Pomponia Graecina, the wife of the famous commander Aulus Plautius, who conquered Britain, was put on trial and divorced by her husband for her devotion to the Jewish, or possibly the Christian, faith. Poppaea Sabina, the Emperor Nero's second wife, made no secret of her tendency to Judaism. These women and many other matrons spread the Jewish faith in Rome's upper classes. There is evidence that Judaism was also becoming popular among the lower urban classes, as well as among the soldiers and freed slaves. From Rome, Judaism spilled over to parts of Europe annexed by the Roman Empire, such as the Slavic and Germanic lands, southern Gaul and Spain. The pivotal role of women in proselytization might indicate a particular female interest in the religion's personal laws, such as the early rules of personal purification, which were preferred to the common pagan customs. Possibly it was also due to the fact that women did not have to undergo circumcision, which was a difficult requirement that deterred many would-be male converts. In the 2nd century CE, after Hadrian prohibited all circumcision, the Emperor Antoninus Pius permitted the Jews to circumcise their sons, but forbade males who were not children of Jews to do it. This was another reason that, parallel with the increase of converts, there was a growing category of God-fearers, probably an adaptation of the biblical term fearers of Yahweh, spomenoi in Greek, metuants in Latin. These were semi-converts, people who formed broad peripheries around the Jewish community, took part in its ceremonies, attended the synagogues, but did not keep all the commandments. Josephus mentions them several times, and describes Nero's wife as God-fearing. The term is also found in many extant synagogue inscriptions as well as Roman catacombs. The New Testament confirms their massive presence. For example, and there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men, out of every nation under heaven, Acts 2:5. When Paul reached Antioch, he entered a synagogue on the Sabbath and began his sermon with the words, Men of Israel, and ye that fear God, give audience, Acts 13:16. In case some of his hearers were puzzled by this address, he said further, Men and brethren, children of the stock of Abraham, and whosoever among you feareth God, to you is the word of this salvation sent, 13:26. The text goes on, Now when the congregation was broken up, many of the Jews and religious proselytes followed Paul and Barnabas, 13:43. The next week, a row broke out between zealous Jews and the 2 successful preachers, but the Jews stirred up the devout and honorable women, and the chief men of the city, and raised persecution against Paul and Barnabas, and expelled them out of their coasts, 1350. The two missionaries went on their way and reached the city of Philippi in Macedonia. There, we sat down, and spake unto the women which resorted thither. And a certain woman, whose heart the Lord opened, was baptized, and her household, Acts 16:13-15. It was precisely in these grey areas, between troubled paganism, and partial or full conversion to Judaism, that Christianity made headway. Carried by the momentum of proliferating Judaism and the flourishing varieties of religious syncretism, an open and more flexible belief system arose that skillfully adapted to those who accepted it. It is amazing to what extent the followers of Jesus, the authors of the New Testament, were conscious of the two competing marketing policies. The Gospel of Matthew offers additional testimony to outright Jewish missionizing as well as its limitation: "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye compass sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he is made, ye make him twofold more the child of hell than yourselves." Matthew 23:15. This was, of course, the criticism of experienced, professional preachers about the strict commandments from which they were distancing themselves. These new preachers were better at interpreting the sensitivities of the shaky polytheistic world, and knew how to offer it a more sophisticated, user-friendly approach to the monotheistic deity. But what was the attitude of their rivals, the more traditional Jewish scholars, toward proselytization and the great spread of Judaism?